All right, gabba gabba hey amigos. So welcome to part 3, the stunning conclusion of our Auth series. So by the end of this lesson, I hope that you will be able to verify tokens in Rails and protect resources with tokens. It might pull in a little bit of authorization, authentication also, since we didn't get to it yesterday. Cool. So goal here is to take those tokens that we were issuing in part 2, and if somebody sends one to us, we should be able to decode it and get whatever we need out of that and do stuff with it. And then maybe you have some routes that you have to have a token for, and maybe some other routes you don't have to have a token for, and we'll play around with that a little bit. So first, let's go all the way back to the beginning in our part 1 and part 2 and see what we remember how to do. Somebody give me a noun. What's the app we're building today?
Yeah, do a bird app.
Bird app. Love it. So this is going to be called Rails new --API birdhouse. Cool. So do all the steps for parts 1 and 2, and then let's reconvene. I'm going to give you 10 minutes. Go for it. Connect 4. All right, that's 10 minutes. So give me some questions that came up while you were working through that. Nothing? Wow, must have explained it so well the last 2 times. All right, let's go through these steps. So we called this birdhouse. So first thing that we're doing is installing bcrypt. So I go to the gem file, I put bcrypt there, I bundle install. I need a route, a controller, and a model for users. So I Rails G model user. Any day now. There we go. I Rails G controller users. Then I go over to the routes and say that I want resources for users, but solamente create. Then I go over to the controller. I make that create action. User has a username and a P word. And then we just send it on back. And status created. Beautiful. Go over to that model that we made. Has secure password. Love it. But has secure password on that. We go over to the migration for that users table. Make a string for username. Make a string for password digest. And with all that, we should be good. So I run that server, I head over to Postman. Oop, 3,000 is already in use. So how's 4,000? There we go. So I send a post request to /users. Username's Kyle, password's Kyle. Yep, gotta run my migrations. Rails DB migrate. Tis migrated. All right, and there's my user back with my password digest. Doing good so far. So that was part 1. Cool, so for part 2, we wanted to verify a token, or the credentials that somebody sends over, and then we want to send somebody a token. So I'm going to Rails G controller authentication, and then go over to my router. If somebody sends a post request to login, I would like to route that request to authentication login. Head over to that authentication controller, add a login method. So first thing we need to do, can we find a user? So let's do a find by, and we're going to find by username params username. If that is not successful, then I want to render status unauthorized. Otherwise, I want to render status okay. But I also want to check the password that they send. So I could say, or not user dot authenticate. Authenticate is one of those magic methods that we got because we used has secure password. And if we give that the password that they send over, it'll handle the hashing and all that other kind of shit for us. Okay, so if we couldn't find the user or if their password didn't authenticate, not authorized. Otherwise, okay. So if I change this to post to login, I get an okay. If I do the password wrong, I get a 401. If I do the username wrong, I get a 401. If I do them both right, I get a 200. Doing good so far. So now we just need to turn that into a token. So I can say the payload that I want to make is user ID is @user.id. The secret is in Rails application secret keybase. And then, oh, we also need the JOT library, so I can bundle add JWT. And then over here, I will say that my token is jwt.encode. We want to encode the payload with the secret. Or encode the payload and then sign it with the secret. And then we're going to send back JSON for token is token. Cool. Now, when I log in, I spell something wrong. Authentication controller. Authentication. Oops, probably something else actually. Oh, JOT. That's it. Since I installed a new gem, need to restart the server. Awesome. So I get a token back. That takes us to the end of part 2. So we should all be here right now. Hit me with some questions.
Would you, knowing obviously the steps in advance and as you get more and more practice with it, would you just preemptively install JWT and any other additional gem that you would need for authentication, or do you like to go by step, seeing the postman, hitting your back end, and then installing it from there?
That's a good question, AJ. So if you get more comfortable with it, yeah, you can install JOT up front and like skip some steps. But like every time you do that, you're also making it more complicated to debug down the road. Because if I did it exactly the way that I just did it, and I probably would in real life, when something broke, I know exactly where it broke because it could only be the thing that I just did. You start combining a bunch of steps together, now you're making it harder to figure out where something broke. So I think there's an advantage in going step by step. But like this particular one, yeah, I've done it like 100 times. So, and I've also seen basically every error that you can have with it. So probably less of a big deal. But in general, I think it, even like in real grown-up professional production work, like going one step at a time probably saves you more time in the long run. Cool, what else?
Can I see your routes file?
Yep. Other questions? Cool. So let's start in on part 3. So first thing we want to do is verify tokens in Rails. So this is, we got a token. Is it, can I decode it? Can I get stuff out of it? That sort of thing. So let's see. Let's do this by, so this is the Birdhouse app. Let's make it so that anybody can list birds, but you have to be logged in to add a bird. That seems kind of realistic. So just watch me, then we're gonna do it together, and then you're gonna do it on your own. So I'm gonna say that get add all part 2 complete. All right, so first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a model for bird. And while I'm at it, let's make a controller also. And over in our router, make resources, birds, and we'll start with the open one, only index. And then in our migration, we can do something like t dot color, t dot string is color, and maybe we've got a species also. Cool. And then in our controller, make an index action. We look up all the birds and render them. It's a little grim, but that should work. All right, let's see that it does. If I Rails DB migrate, they are migrated. This is a play on words. This is birds, get it? And I should probably seed them also. So head over to my seeds. Birds, seeds.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
Yeah, it all kind of works. I create some birds, species, finch, color, blah. Species, shrike, color, meh. And then if I run those seeds, oh, I should destroy all the birds first, you know, get it? Like killing birds. Bird.destroy all. All right, so if I seed that, and make a GET request to birds, I should see my birds back. I see my birds. Very nice. But I'll probably also want to be able to create birds, so we add an action for that. Say this is only index and create. So we'll make a create action. Bird is going to be bird.create. And species will come in as species. And color will come in as color. So I should be able to create birds now. If I go over to post birds, change that to species, change that to color. We add a mockingbird, its color is eh. And we get it back. Now, if I want to restrict this action to somebody who is logged in, what do I need to do?
You're restricting their, once they're logged in, restricting access to create birds. That's what we're trying to do?
Yep. Trying to make it so that if you're not logged in, you can't do any of this.
Oh, if you're not logged in, you can't do it. Okay.
Correct.
Do you pass a user param, the token as a param? Because if they didn't have a token, then they wouldn't be logged in.
Yes. So yeah, if they don't have a token, then they're not logged in. So that's one thing we can do. It doesn't come in as a param though. It's going to come in as a header. So we can say our token is request.headers authorization. And then we can say if not token, then render status unauthorized. Otherwise, go ahead and do all this stuff.
Can you, when you're done with this, explain again a little bit about headers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So right off the bat, since I'm not sending a token, 401 unauthorized. All right, we're protecting something, but still, I can put anything in that and it'll pass at this point. But that's part one. So let's talk about those headers. So HTTP request comes from the client, goes to the server, server gives an HTTP response. That HTTP request and the response for that matter, 3 parts to it. So first part, call this like, probably has like a better name for this, but like the meta. So the in the case of a request, this is going to be the method, the path, and the HTTP version. Next thing are the headers. Headers are key value pairs. And the third thing is the body. So let's look at an actual request.
The thing that's popped into my head was like fetch calls, obviously, like the application content and content type rather.
All right, so these are all the HTTP requests for when I try to load this GitHub page. If I just look at XHR requests, that's like our fetch calls. So we have the path that we're requesting, and we have the method. So those are part of our like HTTP request meta. We have 200 as our response status code and OK as our response status message. That's part of our response metadata. And we have the version of HTTP we're using for all of that. For our request headers, what sent over when I loaded this page, We've got the user agent. That's like what browser were you using? And so I'm using Mozilla on Ubuntu. Neat. Refer, which is the most funny spelling mistake in programming history. Refer with one R is what site did you come from? And well, I entered it in directly, so that's what the referrer is. Accept is like, okay, what kind of data are you expecting me to send back? So it could be text HTML, could be application JSON, could be lots of things. Cookies that we want to send over. Lots of different stuff we can send over. Key value pairs. They can also send us back headers like this. This is the content type that I'm sending you. This is, I'd like you to set these cookies. This is my status. Anything that starts with an X is like not a standard HTTP header. So if I just wanted to add my own headers, make some stuff up, if I start with an X, like X GitHub request ID, I can do that too. And then GET requests almost never have bodies because with a GET request, the server is not required to check to see if you have a body. But like a post request, the thing that I'm posting probably ends up in the body. But that can be whatever. That can be a JSON string. That can be form data. That can be lots of stuff. But that's our breakdown of HTTP headers.
And sorry if this is like a kind of a simpler question, but like in terms of like how the request and response works, basically with the request, because essentially it sounds like both parties obviously are sending like packages of data back and forth to each other.
Correct.
Do we, obviously probably through extensions and whatnot, can control certain things that either can and can't pass? And are there certain things that like, if we were to say, no, I don't want that, then like it just will never receive because of like some outside parameters? I'm sure there's a whole world of that, but yeah.
There is.
Sure.
But yeah, when I'm routing requests around in Rails, like, yeah, I can take a look at the headers. I can take a look at any of the stuff from that request, and I can reject stuff or change stuff or do whatever as it comes in. And I can customize that when I'm sending it out with fetch also. Cool. Other questions? Neat. So,
really quick, when you send over a token, is there like a way? Like this is kind of like you'll probably show us in the future, but is that like where you assign like a role, like an admin or whatnot, and like what they can access?
No, and thank you for that excellent tee-up. Our objective we didn't get to yesterday was differentiate between authorization and authentication, because we've been almost using those words interchangeably, but they mean different things. The thing you were just talking about is authorization. Are you an admin? Are you the person that created this post? Are you a super admin? Are you a guest? Are you a West Coast user? All these things are different roles. That's authorization. Authorization is what are you allowed to do. Authentication is who are you? I'm AJ. I'm Matt. I'm Christine. I'm Kyle. All right, prove it. Here's a token saying that I am this person. Ah, cool. So that's authentication. All right, so you're Christine. Is Christine allowed to delete this post? That's authorization. All we're talking about in this series is authentication. Other questions?
If you go back to your controller, where the code, but yeah. So I just wanted to, on line 9, the one that you have on here. So basically you're just saying that the Rails app, the token it's when we're communicating with the client, you're requesting authorization from them and able to do these functions here.
So the authorization header is typically where you stick a token. I think it would be better to call it an authentication header, but whatever. I didn't make the spec. They spelled refer wrong. How seriously do you want to take them? So right now, token will be equal to whatever I set in the authorization header, which should be my token.
Cool, thank you.
How does our token get to that header?
So in Postman, what we're going to do is if you go over to this Authorization tab over here, you say, what type of auth? We want digest. This is new, not digest auth. What the hell? They moved my cheese, man. We should have an option for token-based auth here. And we don't, which is confusing to me.
I have one that says bearer token.
That's what we want. We want bearer tokens. Is that just down there somewhere? Whatever. We can type it in by hand also. So we could say authorization, bearer, space, and then whatever our token is. And that's how we do that. So let's log in. So I go back over here. I'm sending username Kyle, password Kyle, and I get this token back. So I'm going to copy that token. I'm going to go to my post birds request. And I'm going to add an authorization header and set it to bearer and then that token. The word bearer with a capital B, a space, and then the token. All right. So if I do this, this should work. Magpie. Cool, worked. Because I sent it an authorization header. So to make this a little bit more useful, we should actually read the token, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to pull the token piece out of that. So we can call this auth header. And then we can say something like the token is the auth header split on space and the second index of that. Okay, that gives me the token. Now, if I want to get the payload, I can jwt.decode. Oh, I also need the secret. Rails application secret key base. I can decode the token with the secret, and that gives me a payload. And then with that payload, I should be able to get the user ID. I do payload at user ID because that's what I saved it as. And yeah, and then I can do whatever I want with that. I can look up that user. I could say at user equals user.find user ID. I can check for some other property of that user, like is that user's role admin? Is that user's ID the same as the ID of the person that created this bird? I can do some of those authorization kinds of things here. I'm going to say, right now, just change that to if not user unauthorized. But should still work. Species hawk. Color majestic brown. And it should let this through. Yep. Something it didn't like. Oop, I know what. When you're decoding the jot, you can decode more than one jot at once. So it's a little bit different than the other one. You need to get the first thing that comes back. Can't find a user without an ID. I got your ID. Oh, should have done that right. All right, let's debug. I'm gonna throw a buy bug in there. All right, so token. That looks like our token. Secret. That looks like an okay secret to me. Payload. Hey, there we go. Ah, I see what happened. So, well, you tell me. Why wasn't it able to, on line 13, why is user ID nothing? It's a subtle one.
It'll have to be a string rather than a symbol.
Exactly. It has to be a string, not a symbol. Cool. So if I go back over here, there's my buy bug, and there's my added bird. I have successfully protected a resource. If I try to add that same thing with a bad token, so I just put a big old capital X in front of that. Womp womp, can't decode your token. In fact, we could throw that behind a begin rescue block. So we can try to do those things, and if anything throws an error, then that request didn't work. Oops. And that just keeps going. So we're going to put all of this in there. There we go, 401 unauthorized, because I put this stupid X in here. If I get rid of the X, 200 OK, and my bird has been added. And we have verified a token in Rails and protected a resource with a token. So let's take a look at this create method again. I'm pulling out the authorization header. I'm getting the token out of it. I'm grabbing the secret. Then I try to decode the jot. Then I grab the user ID out of the jot, and then I look up the user. If the user isn't there, the request is unauthorized. Otherwise, go ahead and create this bird and send it back to him. I did the begin and rescue blocks in here because if the token isn't right, this jot decode is going to throw an error, and that allows this little rescue block to show up. Ask me some questions.
I don't know if I'm going to formulate this right, but like if you have a token that you've already created, like I'm just a user or something, and we go to that like JWT or to the jot site, and you decode it, and you see the payload, can you change that payload and like spoof it? Is that like easy to do, or is that like relatively hard to do?
Ooh, who remembers? We talked about that yesterday. You could totally spoof it. What stops that from?
Is that what the key at the end, that's what'll stop it?
Yep.
But like, oh, so that whole message like depends on that key.
Well, if you hash your payload, you won't get the same signature. And so since those signatures don't match, you know that it was tampered with.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
And you need your secret key to generate that hash.
So you can't just like append like that. I remember it was like blue, green, and orange or something, and like the orange was like the signature, the green was like the so you can't just like modify just the green and just like keep that appended at the end.
Exactly, because then your signature isn't going to be the same, and so when you try to decode it, it's like no, signatures don't match.
Oh, okay. Makes sense.
It was changed.
Kind of going off of Jack's question, so that Rails application secret key base, is that unique specifically to your version of the project? For example, if I created an app, open sourced it, somebody else were to fork and clone down my repo, would that secret key base then still be the same for them, or would it be unique?
Theirs would be
It
different.
would be unique? Okay.
Yeah, if I put this on Heroku, it's going to be different there too.
Gotcha.
And really, like, that's where we want to come up with our own secret keys. And there's a gem called .env that will let us make our own secret key and then read that into this situation. Same way.
Just to follow up with that, is the .env, is that just like the .env file and that's just like a hidden file from everyone?
Kind of. The package is .env, and it reads those files and then makes those variables available in here. But yeah, it's a hidden file. You don't want to commit it with your repo. Nobody else should have it. That is like kind of literally the keys to the castle. And literally the key, metaphorically the castle, I guess. So like that's the thing that's top secret and hidden and nobody else has it. And you add a new person to your team, you send them a secure message with their environment variables, and they put them in that env file, and now they can run your app.
Oh, okay.
Cool. What else?
What is the authorization type bearer mean?
I don't know why that got added. There's different kinds of tokens. A bearer token is one where it's kind of like a bearer bond. Who can tell me what a bearer bond is? From finance?
I can take a stab at it.
Yeah, hit
It's
me.
been a while. I mean, it doesn't have to do with just like taking out like some sort of either a bond through the government of some sort, and that you fear the bearer of the bond means that you hold some sort of like responsibility toward it, or you pay it back or something along the lines of there.
Ooh, good guess. So it's the person who owns the bond is the person in physical possession of the paper. It's not any more complicated than that. If you have the piece of paper, you own the bond. There's lots of other stuff, like your mortgage, for example, where like if you break into my house and steal my deed, you don't then own my house. That is the case with bearer bonds, though. And so it is with bearer tokens. A bearer token is if you have that token, you are that person. There's no other like checking that anybody does. So if somebody hijacks your token, they can impersonate you. That's what a bearer token is.
You have kind of a confusing question. I don't know if I'm asking it right, but so like if you're trying to destroy a post, or like think of it like as like a blog site, and like the user's going to delete their blog post, and you want to verify it's like that user's post.
Yeah.
Would you have to send in like an additional parameter to say like ID must equal this when you like with the token or something?
Sure. So if we did something like that, that might look something like blog post dot destroy params blog post ID. So it'd probably be doing something like that, right? What we, I guess it'd be some blog post like that, or like the. So we'd probably do something kind of like that. So what we could do is put an if on it, where it's like if some blog post dot author ID is the same as at user ID, then destroy it.
All right, thank you.
Yep. I guess we wouldn't really need the params in there. Yep, something like that. What else? So we're going to run out of time here, but there's one more thing that I want to make sure that you've seen, and then I'll try to get this video up ASAP so you can do the practice part of this. So this is cool, but I probably want to protect more than one thing in my application. So if I also were keeping track of like nests and hunting grounds and whatever else, I probably want to do a very similar kind of auth process for all of these. So how do I keep from repeating all that code? Well, the secret goes back to like day 4. So birds controller, how do you pronounce this first line here? Somebody help me out.
Is it birds controller inherits from application controller?
Exactly. So that means it gets all of its methods and all of its state. All right. What is in that application controller? Controllers, application. Nothing. Interesting. What if I made an action over here called authenticate? And what if I took all those things that I'm doing in this birds controller that don't really have anything to do with creating a bird? I just take all of that. So, let's see. That's 9 through 30. 9 through 30. Yank. What? Come on. 9 through 30. Yank. 22 lines yanked. Ah, why is that not working? It's driving me crazy. It's not working there either. Oh my god, I'm losing my mind. There we go. Holy crap. All right, so now what if I try to strip all the things that have to do with making birds out of this? Okay, so the auth header, the token, the secret, begin, getting the payload, getting the user. Okay. And then all of this is just like bird stuff. All right. So now I have this authenticate method that's in the application controller. Now if I head back over to birds controller, well, wait a minute. Birds controller inherits from application controller. That would kind of imply that I also have an authenticate method on my birds controller. And by George, I do. So I could probably just call authenticate right here. And now I have this reusable thing. And anything that inherits from application controller has that. And guess what? Everything inherits from application controller.
Could you go back to application controller really quick?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And here's the cool thing. So we know that we have this authenticate method, And since we're inheriting, we have access to that method also. The other thing that you have access to is the state. So since we have @user, since that's being stored on the instance of the controller, that means if we had some reason to use @user anywhere in this method, we have it.
So what does that authenticate return if everything goes through? That just returns true and then it passes through to creating the bird?
Yeah, it just doesn't throw an error.
Okay.
And creates that @user instance variable.
Gotcha.
As soon as you render something, does it just stop the whole call, so
Yep.
it'll never proceed?
It should, yeah. Sometimes it'll bark at you. You can only render a request once. If you try to do it more than once, like if I did that, it'll run the second line, but it'll go, I don't think you meant to do that. Because we already terminated this request. So the real pro move is to use before action. And so this is before any action in here, call the authenticate method, but actually only run that before create. And now we don't even need to do that. Boom! Mic drop. See if it works. All right, I've got a correct token in there. I can add stuff. If I give it an incorrect token, I get a 401 unauthorized. I have successfully verified a token and protected a resource with it. And in a super reusable way. Anything that requires being logged in to do on any controller, I can do this before action authenticate and make sure that that runs first. Pretty fucking cool, right?
I really think that reusability is really cool. I didn't know that.
I know. So this is like the big idea with inheritance, especially like inheriting controllers, is if we do have this shared behavior that you want to use in more than one place, putting it in a somewhere in that inheritance hierarchy is like how you share that around. It's a way to share that around. Because we can also make our own controllers and inherit from those instead. So like I could have, instead of inheriting from application controller, I could have some other controller that inherits from application controller and do something in there and then have this inherit from some other controller instead. It still has everything that's in application controller. In fact, this should all still just work the same. Yep, I got the right token. I can do the thing. I do the wrong token. I get a 401. Nothing changed. So I can create this hierarchy of controllers and all of like their shared behavior and handle it all that way.
Kyle, are we going to get into using Auth to control what is rendered on the front end? Because here, you know, like if a user tried to delete a post and they weren't logged in and it wasn't their post, they would get an error. But how would we set up our app so that, you know, that delete button doesn't even appear for that user?
Sure. So it looks something kind of like this. So I make a JS file. I'm fetching to /birds or whatever. going to give it, it's a post request. I'm going to give it my headers. So like if I had that saved in a variable, I can do whatever. It's pretty common to pull that out of local storage. Get item token, or to do it something like this. Okay, so I send the token over. The body, I JSON.stringify okay, so there's my request. Couple things I can do. So a 401 response is not a failed request. So your catch actually won't even get there. So if you're trying to like handle that with a catch, that's not going to work. What you can do is we've been real darn used to just immediately parsing that response. So we do something like return response.json. And like, okay, cool. So we're super familiar with that. Let me do it. And I get whatever my new bird is. Response.bird. Okay, so that kind of stuff, we can do that in our sleep. We do that all the time. Before you parse this response, though, you have access to all kinds of other stuff. For example, this response.ok property, if you got a 400 series response or a 500 series response, response.ok will return false. So what you could do is say like, if not response okay, throw new error. Oh shit, it didn't work. Otherwise, parse the response and do whatever. And so to your like original question, this could also be like make button show up or hide button, show some error text. We could do something like that.
Awesome, super helpful.
Yep.
Thank you.
Other questions? So I'm going to work on getting this posted up ASAP. Before the end of the day, while this is still fresh, like go through this, get all these steps to work, follow along, and make it happen. All right, have fun with ThoughtMed. Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks.